August 17th, 1982 was a flat, lousy day for me. I've had bad days in my life. I've had days where I was so brokenhearted or so angry that I literally punched holes in drywall and kicked the walls and screamed at the top of my lungs. I was so hurt. But that day ranks up there, top 5 for sure, top 1 maybe. And that was the day that I found out my dad, Herman Lewis Hussman Jr., had died. So that's a picture of Herman 1, 2, and 3 right there. It's shocking how much I look like my little boy Judson in that picture. So that's Ham on the left, Herman Lewis Hussman Sr., and my dad on the right. And Dad had been in the hospital for some time, and I wasn't allowed to see him. Mom thought it would be best just to keep me away from him. Apparently he looked pretty bad, and that's not how she wanted me to remember him. And so I wasn't allowed in the hospital, and he had been in the hospital in and out. He had had heart conditions and heart problems for a long time, so I thought nothing of it. I thought he'll just be bouncing back, and he'll be coming home one day. And so the day he died, my brother and I had gone out with cousins to go swimming. And it was just, I was an 8-year-old kid. I was almost 9. And we had just gone out and had a good time, gone to the public pool, and I was bouncing through life, totally unaware that anything was going on. And then we returned home to my uncle's house, which was at 4000 Hillcrest there in Paducah. This is the house. This is the driveway. And I remember pulling in in Nora's car. My cousin Nora was driving, and we got in, and we bounced out of the car, and we had a wonderful day, and I bounded up the steps. And my cousin, who was a medical doctor, emerged from the home right in front of us. His name was Paul Grumley. And Paul was always the guy that I went to, said, "Hey, how's my dad doing?" Because I knew Paul was always checking up on him. And so this day, he comes out, and I'm bounding up the steps. I said, "Hey, Paul, how's it going? How's my dad?" And he just looked at me, and I remember him looking at the ground and then walking past me without answering and getting in his car and driving away. I remember thinking that was odd. And I went in the house, and a lot of the family was there, and everybody seemed sad. Nothing registered in my head. They took me and my brother in the backyard, which is really wild looking at this picture of the backyard, because back then, the space between that patio and that fence line behind it was infinite. I mean, we played baseball in that space, and now it looks so tiny. But back then, that was the whole world. And they sat my brother and I down, and our pastor was there, Pastor Paul Donner of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Paducah. And I remember him sitting across from me and my brother, and they started telling us something along the lines of, God wanted your dad more. God really wanted to be with your dad, and so he really loves your dad, and so your dad has gone to be with God, and it wasn't clicking in this 8-year-old's mind. And I remember saying, "Are you telling me my dad is dead?" They said, "Yeah, that's what we're telling you." And it still didn't click. I didn't understand the implications of it at all. And I remember shortly after that, within the hour, going with my cousin Charlie Bell to Burger Chef. Anybody remember Burger Chef? Yes. My dad was one of the founders of Burger Chef and their franchises. At the very beginning, he had the opportunity to go with either Burger Chef or McDonald's at their inception, and he chose poorly. When I was growing up, McDonald's was a cuss word in our house. You weren't allowed to say the M word, and it was serious. When we drove past a McDonald's, we were not allowed to look at the McDonald's. Dad would say things like, "Eyes ahead, boys." It was just a poor decision. But he had 3 Burger Chef stores at that time in Paducah, Kentucky. They eventually became Hardee's and Carl's Jr. So that was the evolution of Burger Chef. But I remember sitting behind what we called the number 2 store, which was near Lone Oak, Kentucky. And I remember sitting back there, and there was a big dumpster in front of the truck because Charlie was the manager. He pulled up in front of the dumpster and went inside, and it reeked of fry grease. I remember everything so vividly, this moment in my life. And, there's flies buzzing around the dumpster. And I remember the revelation hit me, I will never see my father again. And I lost it. I screamed and cried and kicked the seat in front of me, and I remember pulling against the seatbelt that I was on, and I just was emotionally gone, freaking out. My brother, and to this day, he has no memories of my dad. He was 6 years old. He doesn't remember a single thing about my father. It didn't click with him until much later. He didn't have any idea what was going on. It just didn't register in his 6-year-old brain until Father's Day the following year. And my mom has relayed this story to me, that she was in the kitchen doing something, cooking, chopping an onion, whatever it was, when Andy comes running in the kitchen, wraps his arms around her leg, and starts yelling, "My dad! My dad!" And it wasn't until like 9 months later that it hit him. He had seen a Father's Day commercial on TV that day. And all of a sudden, he realized it. He realized, I'll never see my father again. And the reason I share that with you today, we're starting our series on relationships. And I want to point out, I think in hearing the story, it's hard for me not to cry telling the story. There's a certain type of emotional anguish that only occurs when it comes to a relationship that has been broken or destroyed. Relationships have this amazing, awesome, awful, terrible power over us. Until I had children, I didn't know what it meant to be truly afraid. Like the thought of losing my kids is the scariest thing I can imagine. And when we see people in anguish, when you see a picture like this one, what is your first assumption? Don't you assume somebody died? I mean, maybe he's physically hurt. Maybe one of his friends treated him poorly. But you see it. You see a person like this, and you naturally assume that she has been betrayed. Someone has died. Someone has abandoned her. You assume that a relationship has broken because we all recognize that at our very core, like the most powerful thing inside us is connected to the idea of relationship. It's connected to the idea of our connections and intimacy with others. If you look at the worst words in the English language, the most painful, awful words, lonely, abandoned. Abandoned is just an awful word. Ridiculed, ostracized, unloved, rejected, undesirable. None of these words are words that we want to apply to our life. In some sense, there's a particular pain that comes with these words that won't come with other negative words. There's something about this that is just like the hell of loneliness and awfulness. And it's because you were created from the very, very beginning. You were designed as a being that was meant to connect with other beings in meaningful ways. It's at your very core of who you are. It is who you are. In the very beginning, you read Genesis chapter 1, God said these words. The creator of the universe said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness." I've heard philosophers talk about how God is love, and if God is love, then the Christian doctrine of the Trinity probably is accurate. That in order for there to be love, there must be something relational. And if God is the end-all, be-all, if He is everything and in everything and through everything, that He must encompass some kind of a relationship in order to be love. So the doctrine of the Trinity is philosophically necessary, some will say. That at His very core, He is a relationship. And we talked about this graphic and this dynamic a lot this summer in our series on the Holy Spirit. You can go back and look that up. But the point is, at the very beginning, it was a plurality. It was God saying, "Let us make them in our image." Let us make them deeply relational is a part of what that means. It means that you were designed, created by a God, in order to be in relationship. That is what you are designed for. When God created the universe, He went through and He said, "I will separate the firmament from the one other firmament, and the firmaments shall separate. And the waters shall rise, and the birds shall fly, and the worms shall crawl out of the ground." And every single day of the creation story, it ends with it saying, God looked at what He had done and said, "It is good," until He created you. And that's not about you. We'll get to that. He created you, and He said, "It is not good for you to be alone." He created man, and we will have a mixed bag in here on how people approach the book of Genesis, and we're a reach across the aisle kind of church. So some people will consider it an allegorical story, some people will consider it narrative history, and you're welcome here. But regardless, in the story, what you find is God creates Adam, the man, and Adam is alone, and God says, alone isn't good. Let's create a companion suitable for him. Let's create other human beings and let them exist in community. From the very beginning, he said, this is all good, this is all good, this is all good, but being alone, that's bad. I want this creation to experience relationship. So at the beginning, you see God creating relationship. At the very end, it's what you see. It says, this is wild. In Revelations, it says, in the book of Revelation, it says, at the end, at this great feast, the new kingdom, the new heaven, it says of God's people that they will see his face, so they will be close to him. And it says his name will be on their foreheads. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen anybody with a face tattoo, but when I think of face tattoos, I think that person was committed to whatever that was that they put on their face, right? What if I had my wife's name, Kara, on my forehead? I'm like the ultimate whooped guy, right, at that point. Like, there's no one ever whooped more than me. But what that means is I am hers. I am forever hers. Unless, like, we broke up and then I'd get a knife through it and blood or something, I'd have to change the tattoo. But if I put her name on my face, it means she and I are permanently forever bonded. And that's what it says in the book of Revelation about the people who will enter the kingdom of God. It says the name of God will be on their faces. And it means ultimately we will be like this with God. We will be his and he will be ours and we will be close to him. It's about relationship. In the same book, it says, then I heard the voice of a great multitude. It says that no man could number. So many people, it says. And it says, they're blessed are those who are invited. Whoops, that's a different slide. Here we go. There we go. Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. It describes the end result as this massive wedding party. I was blessed to go to the Allens' wedding party just 2 weeks ago, and we got on a boat, and we cruised down the river, and we ate together, and I met her friends and family, and we hung out and connected, and I talked to her mom, and she cried, oh, my daughter, all the things that moms do. And then, Chris, your parents too, right? But there's this intimacy in this relationship thing that happens at a wedding feast. It's just it's a picture of community. It's a picture of relationship. So from Genesis to Revelation, that's the theme. That's the theme, is people being in relationship with God and relationship with each other. Jesus, of course, you'll probably never hear a sermon where I don't refer to it, said, love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love doesn't make sense apart from relationship. The word doesn't even function. The definition collapses if we're not talking about connection, if we're not talking about a relationship with others. And then, of course, Jesus, he went around and he'd just go up to fishermen and he'd say, come follow me. The God of the universe could have appeared at the temple in smoke and fire and said, all of you stand out there and listen to my commandments. He could have done that. In fact, that's kind of what the old way was God being out there in a pillar of fire. But instead, when God revealed what he was really like, it was a man sitting in the temple saying, come close. Come up and get next to me. Let's walk together. Let's figure out this journey. Let's walk side by side. It's all about relationship. So when you think about the best words in the world, the best ideas, the best concepts, embraced, included, supported, befriended, noticed. I'm going to date myself here. Breakfast Club. There you go. Yeah. Breakfast Club was one of my favorite movies growing up. And there's this scene in that where Emilio Estevez and Ali Sheedy are sitting together and they're talking about their lives, and she's insinuating that her family doesn't treat her well. And Emilio Estevez says to Ali Sheedy, he says, do they hurt you? And she kind of looks down, she says, they ignore me. He says, yeah. With all his acting gusto, yeah. But it's this very painful idea of a daughter whose parents just don't pay attention to her. But when you look at words like noticed, when you're noticed by your parents, when you're noticed by someone at the church, when you're noticed by someone for who you are and appreciated, man, that's as good as life gets. It's almost the thing we all want the most, is just to be noticed. And if you go through the list, this is what we want. This is what our souls scream out for all the time. And it's solid relationship. It's connection with people. So that's the longest introduction of all time to say we're starting to talk about relationships. We're doing a series called Resolutions where we take the most common resolutions people make throughout the year, and we're doing a 4-month series. So we're taking our 1-week resolutions most of us make from January 1st to January 8th, and we're pushing that for 4 months. And this month we're talking about relationships. We're talking about the importance of them. We're going to talk about some practicalities. We're going to talk about friendship. We're going to talk about family. And I believe God smiles on that. God is a God that came down to get close. And I think it's an important part of his character. So today I want to give you a few tips on stronger relationships. And it starts right here with a peacock and the line, "Life ain't a mating call." My wife and their family, they're farmers in southern Illinois. They have 100 acres of land, and they have chickens and peacocks and cows and goats and all kinds of stuff all the time. You never know. There's always a different dog because one dog's run off and gotten run over on the highway, and another dog killed the chickens, so they took the dog away. And it's just a menagerie of animals all the time. And so last week we were there visiting Kara's grandmother, who was in hospice care, and one of the cousins said, "I got a rooster. Do you want it?" And the family said, "Yeah, we'll take the rooster." So they bagged up this rooster and cut holes in the bag and threw it in our van. So we're driving home with this rooster in our van, and I get to their pen, and I open the top of it, and I carefully, over the fence, dump the rooster on the ground. And they have wings, so the fall was not dangerous. And he flapped his wings and landed. And as soon as he landed, the other chickens came up and had to establish territory. And one of the chickens immediately, just got on him, and he fought back, and they said, "Whoa, we're not having this. This rooster is tough." Because they were all hens, and he was like, But then the peacocks came. And, of course, the rooster is about this tall, and the peacocks are about this tall. And the peacocks would come up to the rooster. It was almost like watching a movie. And they'd get up over him like this, and they'd fly up in the air and beat him with their feet, right? And then he would fight back, and then they'd stop and think about it for a second. Do I want to mess with this rooster? Because he has some claws too. And he'd jump up and the peacocks would come and do it again. But it's all a show of power. It's all a show of who owns this space. And the reason I say life ain't a mating call and show you a picture of this is because for many, many, many people, their entire social media presence could be described as, "Look at my plumage." Right? I mean, so much of our life is just about establishing how awesome I am. It's about, look at how far I've traveled. Look at how many different foods I can cook. Look how cultured I am and how educated I am. And look how much my family loves me. And look at me. We beat our fists and just try to make ourselves look good. And I am here to tell you, if that is the central theme of your life, your relationships will never be what they were supposed to be. I was reading this week about different concepts and saw this quote that really stood out to me. It said, "Evil is not a substance, but a privation of substance." In other words, evil isn't a thing. Evil is the absence of what is good. And it says, "And narcissism is the surest road to hell." And we'll talk about hell in later days as far as the concept of hell and the Christian view of hell. But the point that this person was making is that if you want to be fully self-consumed and fully into who you are and show everyone your plumage all the time, and that's what your life is, you're going to implode. It doesn't end well. It's not the way you were designed to be. Because when you were designed to be relational, it requires looking out there. It requires connecting out there and not being in here all the time. And in an article I was reading along those same lines, it described the habit of treating a human person as a means to an end. If your relationships are narcissistically centered, if they're centered all on what makes you happy, what will give you fulfillment. And I'm not saying happiness and fulfillment can't and shouldn't come from relationships, because I think that's the greatest place to find it. But if the relationships are all about what I can take from the relationship, you taking and not you giving, it doesn't end well. It goes down a path that is poor and ugly. And so people are not a means to an end. It can happen with everyone. It can easily happen with a spouse. I mean, you can easily enter marriage thinking, I'm going to do this to make me happy. People have kids thinking that's where they're going to receive fulfillment, and they view their kids, they try to live vicariously through their kids. So they want their kids to do all the sporting events, and their kids to do this, and kids to be the greatest on the academic team because they think that gives them worth and value. Instead of having children that they invest in and make their lives amazing and support and encourage. And it's just a shift in the way you see things. It's a shift in how you treat your friends. It's a shift in how you treat your spouse. And so don't be the peacock that throws up its feathers all the time and says, look at me, look at me. Number 2 is don't be a Chad, but be a Chad. Here's an example of me showing my feathers. I just wanted you guys to see what a great volleyball passer I was at one time. I used to compete at a pretty competitive level in volleyball. And we would go to this festival every year called Cornerstone Festival. And at its peak, they'd have about 29,000 people there. And the volleyball was very intense. They would have AVP professionals come and play. They would have a lot of college ballers that would come and play. And it was hardcore volleyball. And we would play for 8 and 9 hours a day out in the baking sun. But there was this guy that we would play with, and his name was Chad. And I don't think Chad would mind me saying this at this point in his life. This is Chad right in the middle. I debated long and hard about showing topless men in the church, but there they are. And, well, please don't cheer for that. In fact, let's just move. Chad is the guy in the middle dumping water on my buddy Paul. And I'm hesitant to say it, but I think everybody thought Chad was a real jerk. Because Chad wanted to win at volleyball. He was a great volleyball player, so we all wanted him on our team. Everybody wanted to play with Chad because he was a spectacular baller. But he was also just a pain in the butt. If you hit a ball out of bounds, I mean, his facial expression let you know that you had blown it. You know, he's the kind of guy that if he's hit it into the net, he would kick the ball off the court and somebody would have to go fetch it. You know, and if you lost, he would just sit and sulk. And it was hard to like Chad. But it was, you know, he was a baller, so we all wanted him because we wanted to win too. And Chad came back to that festival because it was an annual event. And Chad came back one year, and he was absolutely transformed. This is a picture of him at his marriage. He was just a different guy. He was calm, cool. If you hit it out of bounds, he'd slap you on the back, say, man, good shot. You gave it your all. I mean, good job. I remember one time we were playing this tournament. We were in the finals. It was a fours tournament, so he was one of our 4 players. And he was nowhere to be found. We couldn't find Chad. Like, where is Chad? And so we're playing 3-on-4 for quite a while. And after 20 minutes, Chad comes sauntering onto the court. Because after that year, this is how he walked. Hey, guys, how you doing? And he walks onto the court like this, and he says, oh, you guys held your own without me. That's great. Like, Chad, what have you been doing? He says, I was getting a henna tattoo of angel wings on my back because I thought it might make me jump higher. All right, Chad, that's cool. But he didn't care if he won or lost. He just made you feel good all the time and seemed to really enjoy life. So one time we're back at camp, and I said, Chad, I got to ask. This was 3 years later. I was afraid of Chad. I did not want to ask him even what happened because he was such a pain prior. But finally we're at camp. I said, Chad, I said, I got to ask, what happened to you, man? Because, I mean, you used to be pretty challenging to be around, and people felt like they walked on pins and needles every time you were around. And now you're just like the most laid-back, calm, cool, and collected person I ever met. What happened? He said, you know, H, he said, I lost friends over it. He said, I had some friends that told me, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And they walked away from me. And he said, I realized at that time that it's not worth it. That just being all uptight all the time and being upset all the time and being negative all the time, being passive-aggressive and angry and pushing people and not supporting people, he said, I just realized that it was causing serious problems in my life. And he said, I decided to change. And so we had this long conversation about how do you do that. And it basically came down to, he just said, you just kind of got to start being nice. And it wasn't this big dramatic thing where he went to a psychiatrist and they helped him transfer. He just realized, I'm a jerk and I don't want to be a jerk anymore. And all his relationships benefited from it. Just that simple idea of don't be a jerk. So that's my advice today, and we can just close up the service. Don't be a jerk. I'm a preacher. I'm going to keep talking. I'm not actually closing up the service. Although I am not going to say end in conclusion and then go for another half hour. So I want to encourage you to start with the people that you have to start with. I remember the very first time I really started reading the Bible seriously, I was on my toilet. A guy had told me, he said, if you want to start reading the Bible regularly, put one on your toilet and read it every time you sit down. And I said, okay, all right, cool, great advice. And so I started reading it, and I'm in the bathroom, and I read the Sermon on the Mount. And I remember leaving from reading the Sermon on the Mount thinking I should be nicer to my brother. And I should be nice. The Sermon on the Mount says nothing about being nice to your brother. But that's the words of Jesus and how they impacted me as I left thinking I should help people more. And I think that's just kind of a central idea of the gospel and of Christianity is that you're going to have people in your life, your sphere of influence that I don't have. And when you have people in your life, take advantage of that. Treat them well. In 1 Corinthians 13, which is kind of the wedding chapter, it says love is patient, love is kind. If you just want to know what it is to love people, be kind. Be nice. Don't be a jerk. And I just threw up a list of stuff that I thought, say the nice stuff and not the other stuff. You know, you'll have the opportunity all the time to say bad stuff to people. Just decide not to and start saying the good stuff. Be the person that when somebody said, I love the phrase that I heard at a funeral one time. They said, he never had a negative word to say about anybody. Be that person. That'll transform your relationships right there. You say, but I want to fight for my rights. Don't be the peacock that fights for your rights and fights for your territory. Just don't do it. Just decide you're going to be nice to people. Be nice. Pay for lunch. Don't always let somebody else pay for your lunch. Reach across the aisle. People have different views than you. It doesn't mean they can't be your friend and be close to you. Do what you say you will. Don't say you're going to do something and then don't do it. Stop to think of others. Write a letter. I got a handwritten letter from somebody. It was 14 pages recently, and I was dreading it because I knew most of it was going to be negative. But there was something about getting a letter in the mail that was handwritten, even by a guy who wanted to get on me about something. It was just a handwritten letter. So take time to do things for people. Clean the kitchen as opposed to leaving the kitchen a mess. And you could go on and on and on about what it means just to be nice, to be caring, to be compassionate, to think about others before you think about yourself. And it's summed up in what I've already said, is be nice and not a jerk. If you're a jerk here, stop. Metanoia, the idea of repentance in Scripture, is this idea of looking carefully at what you do wrong and stopping doing those things. It's turning towards something good. Turn towards niceness instead of being a jerk. There's a show nowadays that has all the feels. It's called This Is Us. And This Is Us is one of those shows. I can say quite proudly that I've never seen an episode of the Gilmore Girls. And maybe if I watched it, it would be like watching It's a Wonderful Life for the first time, and I would think, why didn't I ever see this before? But This Is Us, I just sit and cry through every episode. And there's a scene that takes place over Thanksgiving, and there's a guy who's dying of cancer, and then there's this other guy's girlfriend who's kind of a pain in the butt, and she comes out and she's smoking on the steps, and she says to him, she says, so what's it like to be dying? And she's just not being nice at the time. She said, how does it feel to be dying? And I want to share with you his answer from the show, because I think it's poignant. He says, it feels like all these beautiful pieces of life are flying around me, and I'm trying to catch them. And then he describes what those pieces are. It's a little bit of a long quote, but he says, when my granddaughter falls asleep in my lap, I try to catch the feeling of her breathing against me. When I make my son laugh, I try to catch the sound of him laughing, how it rolls up from his chest. But the pieces are moving faster now, and I can't catch them all. I can feel them slipping through my fingertips. And soon, where there used to be my granddaughter breathing and my son laughing, there will be nothing. We did a series this last year on death anxiety and the reality that death is approaching us all. And if you get nothing out of this series on relationship, get this. There is nothing and there never will be anything more valuable than your granddaughter falling asleep on your lap. There is nothing and never will be anything more valuable than the laughter of your son or a friend. There will never be anything more valuable. And if you have misplaced priorities and misplaced values that are putting those things on the afterburner, it needs a shift of thinking. Metanoia, repentance, turning. It means I'm going to start valuing the things that are valuable. Some of you, and maybe this is a God thing right here, right now, some of you are in a circumstance where you think, I want that and I can't have it. I would encourage you, come talk to me, come talk to the prayer team before you leave today. But for most of us, it's a shift of priorities that needs to occur. It could be as simple as you're going out to eat. Ask a friend to go along. Somebody that you normally wouldn't have, that you would like to connect with more. Or your son, give them a call. Your dad, your aunt, your uncle, whoever it is. Make relationships, make connections and meaningful, intimate connections with other people the number one priority of how you live out this life as we love God well. Jesus came and he went to fishermen and he said, come follow me. It's the same message he would say to you today. He says, it's having that name tattooed on your forehead. I saw a picture this week about a Bible reading vigil. They were reading through the entire Bible in succession, and so people would sign up for hour slots, and they would sit and read the Bible. And the picture that was in the newspaper was this guy who had a prayer shawl over his knees as he read the Bible, and he had some kind of hat on that was not a typical modern-day Christian hat. It was clearly a religious symbol to him. And then he had like a candle burning nearby. And I thought, why did they take that guy's picture? Because that's not, why when people think about religion, do they think that it has to be all, highfalutin? But then I realized that stuff is probably meaningful to him. And you can't look at that guy and you can see him and you can see this guy is dedicated. This guy is committed to what he believes. And I hope and pray that we will be a church filled with individuals. It doesn't mean you need a prayer shawl, and it doesn't mean you need a special hat or a candle. But I do hope when it comes to social media, when it comes to your families, when it comes to your workplace and your connections there, that people will be able to look at you and say, this is a person who is committed. This is a person who has the name of Jesus written on their forehead. And I may not agree with them, and don't be a belligerent jerk about it, but find ways in your life to be committed to God in a way to where your identity is wrapped up in Him. Be in relationship with God and be closely connected, because Jesus said, come follow me, to them, and that was a cry that rang out throughout history, was the God of the universe came as a man to say, I want to be close to you. Come, follow me. And I want to encourage you to be a follower of Jesus.